Hi, I'm Laurie Dobson, and today is February 17th, 2021. I'm on the island of Great Cranberry. It's a sunny day, a lot nicer than yesterday. So I wanted to talk today about some of my pet peeves. And number one is seesaw censoring and also cover-ups. So, you know, where the seesaw censoring, somebody decides they're going to remove something, then they're going to bring it back, but it's not going to be back in the same form. It's back, it's forth. The point is, you're not going to get full, unfettered free speech. You're going to get it muddied and molded the way somebody else wants you to hear it. So that's my first pet peeve. And it just shows that, lawful citizens don't get a priority of free speech. It's the message. That's the point that you need to get when you see that going back and forth. And it's not just put on a plane of inviolable free speech. We don't mess with it. So people have been flippant about censorship. It's one of my problems with things today, by and large, the other freedoms and the constitutional matters that people have taken seriously in our past. And our cemeteries are full of people who paid the ultimate price for our free speech. And we shouldn't be making hay with it. It's something we were taught was sacred. Okay? I don't think the halls of Congress are sacred. I think whether they uphold the law or not is what's, to me, the act of being sacred, being in trust with what we were given, our legacy of freedom. And I just think for too many people, it's just enough to make a quick comment on a page or an emoji of support when someone is taken down with censoring, or somebody who has had their character attacked, like Phil and Karen Whitney this last week, where they were made blood sport of. I found it nasty business and slander. Two private individuals, two town people, island year-rounders, and no harm there, right? We can just attack them, right? So I think anything you think is just fine, just apply it to whether you'd be okay with someone doing it to you. I get back to that simplicity thing, So personally, I find that pathetic, and I think that people just should get a life, if that's all that they can think to do with their time, which I think is demonstrates their own desperate situation, and they should be taking a look at that themselves. So second thing, pet peeve, libraries that ban books, places that ban information, higher learning. Any institution that does that, any library, any place that's supposed to be upholding the rights of people to have access. They're paid by their towns to have access to things you would normally see on the book stalls maybe, but a library is a place where you can come and read something in the privacy of your own home and try to understand what it's about. Mein Kampf, Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, Lord of the Flies, Catcher in the Rye. We all know this, but we don't seem to recognize it in the modern day. So libraries have, they've shown the way in the past, and they showed internet freedom and privacy at a time when we were all concerned about that. So clearly there are books on the shelves that governments would prefer we not see, because we would start taking ourselves more seriously and taking our country back. Can't have that. Third pet peeve. Newspapers that tie in the political page with the advertising page. I'm speaking in specific to a newspaper, the Kennebunk Post, that did this back in when I was actually running for office in 2008. But before that, prior to that, there was an issue about water rights. There's a movie now you can see called Tapped, and it's about the bottled water industry. It's about Poland Spring Water and its foray into Maine, in particular Freiburg, but in our case, it was coming into Kennebunk, Port Kennebunk, Wells, and Algonquin. They wanted to put the straw in down there, suck it out, take it down to Massachusetts, and process it there. So that was a delicate watershed. It's for it's coastal. It would have been easy for them. It would have been very bad for the water system locally here, locally there. I was living there at the time. So I felt that it was necessary not to have the full page ads at the time. And it was election season, right? Coming up 2008. And full page ads by Poland Spring Water. But that's not supposed to affect the editorial page, right? Well, it did. They were very loath to cover anything. And at the time, the big thing, when this movie came out, Tapped, it was about how people were protesting the taxing district commissioners, and they were without any, quietly prepared to sign away the water rights to the area for 50 years with no touching it. And once you get in with international multinational corporations, you can't get in the way of their profits. You can, it's for some reason, you can't touch them. You can't get in the way of their profit. Once they have it, you can't take it away. So if we'd signed on, we would have been screwed. A lot of us got together, Save Our H2O, and had that stopped. But it was a real confront in that area. And the local paper didn't want to cover the fight and didn't show up to the meeting that was later put in the movie. And you'll see me in there in gray hair. But they felt they were beholden to their advertisers. And this advertiser was a very wealthy, well-endowed one. And it was just during the election that it was a big deal, because they wanted to control the flow of information through the newspaper. They wanted to make sure that it favored them, didn't disfavor them, with people that were speaking against water, the Poland Spring Water. So I felt very unsupported by the paper. They saw me as an adversary to their advertiser. So that was a problem. So we can play games with money, with censoring, but when money is there, it speaks, and we certainly know that. So when things get censored, sometimes we don't see it in the present day, but we can recognize it later. It comes into play. We have a little perspective, and then we can see down the road, like war and other big ticket events that we're supposed to treat like sacred cows, but at the time. So then what happens when time evolves and we have to do something about these things that they've just gotten away with? Who addresses that? Do we have to change everybody's minds after they've been made up? Even down the road with more perspective and other points of view coming up, there really is no clear responsibility for those who push these narratives, these lies, and the propaganda that they had in place. So, once the stories get committed to memory, it takes 40 times to learn something, repeat it over and over again. But once you get it, and you don't want to unget it. They say it's easier to convince somebody of a lie than to talk them out of it. I think that was Mark Twain. It certainly seems to be true. Because people really do resist any changes to the narrative. They resist education. They resist new input, new information. You'd think people would want to have the story straight as far as they could understand it. But I think the sad thing is, I think sometimes now people just want a simple solution, something they can repeat to their friends, and yeah, that's right, isn't that terrible? Or that's great. But usually it's, those guys are bad, aren't they? We tend to become resistant, and it causes cognitive dissonance in us if we have to try to change our stories, right? So it's kind of like a right and wrong, that's my story, and I'm sticking with it. But sometimes the story has to change because they have to break out a different version than the one that they pumped out there. And sometimes it's a political problem, it's a liability, and they no longer need the person that was pushing it. For example, I'll come up with a few. They also need to be set up later as a fall guy, the bad guy. So what did we have recently? The nursing home death scandal. Who is blamed now for Cuomo's false lower numbers of deaths? Cuomo just blamed the healthcare workers, those people who were on the front lines that we were throwing into the lion's mouth are now the bad guys because he's blaming them. The deaths that he ordered, the program and the policy. The buck stops with him. Remember, he kept saying that to us? Well, it doesn't if you'll listen to him this week. Buck stops everywhere else. We're all just shocked that he would do this. when before we worshipped him, right? We worshipped the man. So why are we allowed to not worship him? Because we're allowed to do that now. We weren't before. We knew that. So his trusted aide, Melissa, is the one that was put out there to let the people, the Democrats, know. She apologized to them that they felt that they couldn't put out the correct numbers because apparently they were afraid of a federal investigation at the time, which of course would be there because it's so shocking. It's horrible. The numbers were twice what they told us. And you'll see, you couldn't, he's now the scapegoat for the numbers that he cut in half. And so, and remember, Cuomo was also the guy who'd cut their Medicare budget in New York. It wasn't a beloved character in so many other ways, but for this one thing, he definitely got a giant hoist and elevated in all the news. And it was manufactured stories. Now his head's on a plate, but they manufactured the consent around all of us to support that story of Cuomo can do no wrong, and we all have to sit there mesmerized and spellbound and in love with him, and he was going to get so many marriage proposals. Not anymore. That is how we're strung along. And now they're going after the golden boy. But don't worry, someone else is in the wings getting scrubbed up to take a new place on the stage, because they won't go after Fauci. Fauci's got serious support for decades. Maybe it's the mob, whatever it is, but perhaps that's the reason he just got that award from Israel, an award for his role in how he's done things so far. They've let it be known they're pleased with him. They've given him $1 million, so that's a bribe. It's a bribe, and it's an advertised bribe. So things are now much less. I guess they're less shocked with themselves. We should be shocked, but there just seems to be no shame anymore about these things, open bribes. Anyway, there is a bit of a shuffle. Some folks are moving on, and some are staying, like Fauci. Some are leaving, Cuomo, I imagine. Some are made to be the villains. Melissa will probably get a hit for her support for Cuomo. It's just recasting. There's a new season. There are new episodes. And new players are needed to get these ideas freshly, and these lies freshly planted in our minds. There's no old stale plots. They're afraid of losing us. So, maybe Cuomo wanted to say some truthful things and thought he had enough personal charisma to say things. Maybe he feels he wants to tell the truth on some of these things. We don't really know how that evolved, but we won't be told. That's for sure. So they need a change of script writing. And as we come up to 1 year of lockdowns, it's coming up 1 month, March 17th. Cuomo promised that once we flattened that curve, we would get out of danger and we'd have our lives back. Some maybe felt it was that he wasn't taking it seriously. Maybe he feels the need to say something in retrospect. I'd like to think enough of him to think that he wants to help us deal with this as it evolves. But he's just so useful as a whipping boy right now. I don't think that we're going to be allowed to love him anymore. We need to have a few culprits, because people are looking for a change, and there won't be any change in policy. You aren't going to get the freedoms back that you want. That doesn't serve them. It's not useful. The COVID numbers are down, of course, because it's the flu, and the flu numbers eventually go down. It's the flu you see now, because where else would it have gone? It's there. It's still there. It's just been called COVID. Everything's called COVID. If you don't want it, if you go in the hospital without it, it somehow manages to become COVID. So, especially with the false positive numbers, you get a test in the hospital, chances are you've got COVID, or, you just crank up those cycles. You're going to find it in the system somehow. That's what it's designed to do. Find it if it's anywhere there, even if it's one dead stray virus from years ago. You guys can find this out. You know what I'm talking about. All right, back to my pet peeves. So I think they need to keep the attention off of Biden long enough to get through whatever they have planned for the national address to the nation. I think maybe they're trying to distract us from that, because will he be wearing a mask or not? Do we want to take up a news cycle discussing that? No, because the mask hides whether he's actually saying it or if it's piped in and pre-recorded, and you can't tell if he's got the mask on. So my pet peeve number 4 against newspapers and censoring and tying in the advertising and the political page, the editorial page, is because you should not have views of a neutral, objective, right, newspaper or media that's trying to give people actual information. You're not supposed to have any kind of prejudice or slanted view. And I say that now because that was part of the journalistic ethic, but it's not, it's such a joke now. It's, the money now is the narrative and the only story they're interested in. Just follow the money and you get your story. But those that still have it. So what we have to go by is speculation, which is conveniently called conspiracy theory. And that's a CIA term, by the way, coined from the 1960s. The church investigation attempted to go into, the fault there, but they weren't able to touch the lone gunman theory. For the purpose was to not go into that, and they were successfully diverted that from the understanding of the public. It was allowed to stand, this magic bullet that managed to ricochet around 7 times and do the impossible. That's what we've accepted. Same kind of crazy lies around 9/11, if you look into it at all. But don't touch that one. That's a sacred cow. You can't touch 9/11. Well, there's a couple crows looking at some peanuts we've thrown out in the backyard. It's kind of fun. I'm told that, by the way, that they'll bring you nice shiny things if you're nice to your crows. So be nice to your crows. Your old crows. All right, so we do our best to keep up with all these fishy stories that we're told. I'm going to tell you a fish story right now. Gosh, this might be a long video, but all right. So Putin actually caught a frozen fish when he was with Bush. When he came and visited the port, apparently his coming to the port was called the Kennebunkport Summit. It was Papa Bush's idea. When they were fishing, they had a hard time, so they bought a fish, and it kind of came up. It was kind of a funny thing. And I just think that fish stories and censorship, lots of stories. Back then there was, when Kennebunkport, when I was also running for office, and we had things that were happening. We had anti-war marches, impeachment marches. We had concerts to raise the issues. Papa Bush had Putin come something to just try to help defuse the fact that Cheney was hawking around about going to war with Iran, because remember, only real guys attack Iran, not just the Iraq war, which we were protesting. But he wanted to go there, so I was part of an effort called the Kennebunkport Warning, which said that if an attack was put on Iran, that we would blame Cheney because it would be his fault, because he had been promoting it, and we wanted to make sure that he wouldn't get away with that. So some efforts, some pushback. That's what you can do. It's still out there. We're still able to do it. And I think it's necessary more now than ever to push back on these fables. Some fables are more resistant than others, but in time, every one of them gets changed. So you call it a conspiracy theory. Eventually, it'll either be fact or it'll be proven to be a true fantasy, but we'll find something else out. And in the meantime, we all have to be skeptics. We all have to be true to our ability to learn as we go and to change it. If the story is not true, people deserve to know that. People deserve to know that Russiagate was a 3-year hoax. People deserve to know, and they're going to find out, that whole fire extinguisher that was supposedly used at the Capitol to kill Brian Sicknick, the policeman, was not a true story. That his brother said that evening he was in good spirits, even though he'd been pepper sprayed. Somebody else said he was pepper sprayed. The story is getting opened up now because there's too much to refute it. So we can't hold up that story. It's not, they don't need it anymore anyway. The story was good because they had to have the Capitol look really, really bad. It had to look like a staged insurrection and not just a riot, which there were plenty of those in the summer, because they had to have it as the basis for the impeachment. And they had to have an impeachment. And why? Because there was too much legitimate problem with the storyline that the New York Times put across their page, that it said, officials find no evidence of fraud. Election officials nationwide find no fraud, right? Impossible. Bloody impossible. Lies, 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 lies. But the lies are kind of like pins in a dress you're trying to do a hem. They're there long enough to help hold it up so you can sew it into place. Then you can take your pins out. So pins are falling. Cuomo's falling. He's no longer needed. Certain lies around JFK or who this, who that, Putin coming, why, attacking Iran or not, 9/11, all the lies that we've been told on many, false flags, the Gulf of Tonkin to get us into the war in Vietnam. That was a false flag. False flags are real. They're not conspiracy theories. They're done to help the government covertly do things. The Iran-Contra debacle with Ollie North. That took up a whole summer watching the TV every day, looking at the appalling display of government misadventure. Governments are really something. They take all of our time, our effort to try to flush out, to analyze conspiracy theories put out by them, and we just try to catch up. That one about the Capitol was one giant conspiracy theory, and who knows who put that on? Who knows who those players were at the very beginning starting that thing? But it was very useful because they wanted Trump out. They wanted Biden in. They have corporate interests. They have the money. Follow the money. So that's enough. I'm just disgusted. But I'm disgusted, truly disgusted, when it hits home and it happens in my neighborhood. It happens to people that I care about, friendships that I value, institutions that I think are doing good on the island, and somebody doesn't like something, so they turn it into a whole melee. They had the tar and feathers, they'd have gotten them out. And I just want to call you guys to conscience. All right, have a good day.